It's the SKOR North Twin Show.
All right, SKOR North Extra Innings. Declan Goff here. I'm joined with Ross Brendel. The Twins falling to the Baltimore Orioles today. They are now 6-10 on the season. That's right. That's just 6 wins in your first 16 games. There's your St. Cloud State math coming alive from Dick Bramer over to me here. They haven't won a series since the opener against the Kansas City Royals. And my theme here today, Ross, is don't get dragged to hell. And that's where the Twins seem to be headed. They seem like they're being dragged into hell. And when I mean the baseball hell, I'm talking about like the White Sox, who are like leading the charge in the basement of hell right now, saying, come join us. Obviously, the Rockies are probably there. The Marlins are there. I know Oakland's actually won a few games here and there, but like, let's be honest, the Oakland A's, mostly organization, and I'll put the baseball team second, are also in baseball hell. And the Twins cannot be dragged down to hell. Now, I know you've played the Dodgers, one of the best teams in baseball. Played the Baltimore Orioles, clearly one of the top, 2 of the top 5 teams in baseball. And sure, you have some softies coming up. You're going to see the White Sox a ton over the next few weeks. You even have like the Angels mixed into there. Plenty of time to get things right. But against these good teams, you are expected to show up. I think that's what I'm mostly disappointed by. You've gotten your ass kicked in the majority of these games against the Baltimore Orioles and LA Dodgers. And again, 2 of the premier teams in baseball. But I definitely overhyped that. I thought this team, the Twins, coming into the season was going to be one of the better teams in the American League and a legit contender in the American League. And right now, we can safely say, whether it's, early in the season or not, the Twins are not legit contenders. The Twins are not on the level of the Baltimore Orioles, of the LA Dodgers, etc. And the worst thing you can possibly do here is get dragged into hell. Plenty of time to crawl back up. It's a long season. But that's where I'm at here, Ross. You've gotten just your butt kicked against 2 of the premier teams in baseball, and it hasn't even been particularly close.
Well, you referenced your St. Cloud State math. I'll reference my Lakeville math. So if the Twins are 6-10, but 2-1 against Kansas City, that would put them at 4-9 against the rest of the teams in baseball that they've played. That is not optimal. And then you mentioned competing against the better teams. Yes, if you ever want to elevate to being a league champion or winning a World Series, you need to compete and play well in these series. And then you talk about, Declan, don't get dragged into hell with the Chicago White Sox, the Marlins, the Rockies. I think the A's will eventually be there at some point as the season goes on. And you would look at the Twins and you would assume that, well, the roster's still good enough. They won't get dragged down to hell. But Declan, you still have to beat those teams when you play them. Mm-hmm. And right now, this team that's going out there every day, again, injuries are playing a part in that. But as the manager would tell you, you can't use that as an excuse because nobody's going to feel bad for you. I don't know, Declan. I don't feel safe in saying that the Twins will win 2 out of 3, if not sweep the Chicago White Sox. I don't think anybody can feel that way right now. On the bright side, though, Declan, once you get through the next game with Baltimore, in theory, assuming the Twins can start to win some series, they can claw back into this thing very quickly because how important divisional games are. You now get the Tigers coming up, you get the White Sox coming up, and those swings in the division can happen very quickly. Heck, the Twins were, 6 outs away from another 2-game swing in the division before the 8th inning ate them alive on Sunday. So, again, from the last time that I talked to you, Declan, I still think it's early to panic, but we're starting to see a lot of bad signs, and they're just, if you start thinking off the top of your head, Declan, name things that are going well. It's probably Joe Ryan. It's probably Ryan Jeffers. Until the last few days, it's probably most of the bullpen. What else am I missing? Byron Buxton's healthy.
Yeah,
we think.
I put that in the positive category, by the way. I do put that in the positive category. His glove is still fantastic. We'll get into him in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the injuries stink. If you were to say that, hey, the season's going to start, and by April 16th, so by like basically the 15th game of the season, Royce Lewis is already going to be on the IL. Carlos Correa is going to join him on the injured list. You already knew about some of those bullpen guys, but to your point, the bullpen has probably been their biggest strength throughout the course of the 15 games, even with the slow start out of the season. And now you have guys, out of necessity, like Trevor Larnach having to come up. Jair Camargo puts together a fun little at-bat in, garbage time tonight, which is great. I'm sure personally that's an awesome moment for him, but certainly not the start you wanted to the season. And yeah, I do envision that they'll kick the crap out of the White Sox. I know where you're coming from, and you are probably justified, and you probably are speaking on behalf of a lot of Twins fans saying that you can't count on this team to take 3 out of 4 from Chicago or win a series against the White Sox. But man, you can't just get dragged all the way down here, and that's my biggest fear. And even though you're in a weak division, thank God you're in a weak division. Starting the season like this with gut punches to your lineup, and your starting pitching, your rotation, the back end of it has been atrocious. It has been obviously a very less than optimal start for a team that had the division basically wrapped up before the season started. At least they were being predicted to win this Central and by a landslide. And now, I know Baseball Reference updated it, but I think the Twins' odds have dropped about 15% in the first 12 games. I'm not slamming Panic Meter. I'm a big Fallout fan, so I've been binging that on Amazon Prime because I played the video games. I'm not in like Fallout Shelter. I'm not going down into the vault yet and not coming ever back up to the wasteland. But mercy, this has been a less than ideal start here. And I think, again, the thing that just really frustrates me is you knew when you had the Dodgers and the Orioles in the schedule, like, oh, those are 2 nice teams. Those are like, World Series contending teams that a lot of teams have picked that have a lot of aspirations and rightfully so have a lot of projected star players on their roster. And they haven't even competed with them. If they're losing 5-6, 6-7 ball games or 4-3, 3-2 ball games, we're probably talking about, oh man, they should have done this in the bullpen, or they should have sent this guy up in the pinch hitter. And those would be the fun, nitpicky conversations we could have. And instead, they're just getting their butts kicked by, so far, 2 of the better teams in baseball.
First off, a very good Hawk Harrelson reference with mercy. Good job right there, Declan. The one thing that I would bring up, and please don't make me out to be the excuse guy, because I love to rip as much as anybody. But when you're not competing against the Dodgers and you're not competing against the Orioles, how fair or not fair is it to start mentioning, well, Royce Lewis isn't playing, Carlos Correa isn't playing. Say what you want about Max Kepler, but he's not playing. You're missing 3 legitimate cogs in your lineup. However, it's an organization's job to have organizational depth and be able to overcome some of those things. I don't know if it's fair to say you should have to overcome 3 of those things all at one time in April when, let's be honest, most teams are still getting their sea legs. Some do it better than others. Some get off to better starts than others. Declan, in my lifetime, historically, when the Twins have been good, going back to the early 2000s through now, this is a team that historically doesn't play super well in April and sometimes into May. It takes them into June, July, and August to really get going. So a part of not getting dragged into hell, to go with the theme, Declan, to stick with that, is can you survive this? Can you get to the end of April into May 1st, right around 500? And I think the number I keep floating is, can you get into May 1 and maybe June 1 just within like a handful of games of first place? Can you be within 5 games of first place on June 1st trying to overcome all these injuries and trying to get that rotation right? I don't know if they can, but I think that's the hope. And a part of getting the rotation right is they're going to have to figure out what's going on with spots 4 and 5. I don't think you can quit with the plan after 3 or 4 starts. But the early returns on Varland and Paddack are meh or mixed at best. I would say Paddack, until his most recent start against the Orioles, had been better than Varland. But that is one spot, Declan, where outside of what we saw one start from Simeon Woods Richardson, I don't think the depth of the starting pitching at the major league level and the minor league level for this team is very good at the moment. That's why it was always my hope they would stay in the mix, perhaps be leading the division into July, and then go out and acquire another starter. I don't know where they turn to right now if they want to try and find another option. It could just be going back to Woods Richardson and hoping that it's real and that he continues to show it at the big league level. I think that's equally a part of this. The hitting, I don't know, Declan. I really don't. I don't know what to make of it now. This is basically 2 years in a row of seeing the same stuff from the lineup. But the back half of the rotation, that's going to be a huge part. If you're getting non-competitive starts and you're not hitting, I mean, Game 2 against Baltimore tonight, Declan, they get up 3-0. I think almost everybody goes, well, this game's over, right? I mean,
yeah.
Even if you hold Baltimore to 3 runs, do you really think they're going to score 4? So that's the tough part right now. It's not just one singular issue with the Minnesota Twins. It's many issues with the Minnesota Twins, and you got to start fixing them in some way, shape, or form.
And AJ and I did an extra innings. I think this was last week, maybe in the Dodgers series. You need your 3 kind of pillars. You need the intersection to happen between your lineup, your starting pitching, and your bullpen. And I actually think the Twins bullpen has mostly, outside the blip on Sunday, has been right there where it should be. And again, that's without Duran. That's been without Thielbar for the most part. Duran had a successful bullpen, so he might be on track to come back here in a week or two. But the bullpen's mostly been there. But when you get starts from Chris Paddack and Louie Varland, those have been atrocious starts that just completely bury you to begin with. I mean, both those guys have been bad. I think Varland's most likely pitching for his spot in his next time out when the Twins return home. That's clear. I think they will still stick with Chris Paddack because they have a lot of belief in Chris Paddack, and they talked him up. And again, to your point, they don't really have another choice between those two. Like, one of those two is still going to remain in the rotation for at least the next month or so. But those guys haven't given them a shot. I thought the lineup yesterday actually strung together a good enough recipe to put you in a position to win the game. But Louie Varland had struggles, and him and Paddack have had the same struggles, which, for whatever reason, it's this execution with 2 strikes. Typically, when you get a pitcher count, when you get those 1-2, 0-2, 2-2 even strikes to a degree, you're most likely to get more of the outs than you aren't. And for right now, Paddack and Varland are just giving up tater tots. They're giving up hard content. They're leaving the ball over the plate. I mean, this isn't even just some bad luck stuff, which can happen in baseball here and there. These are 2 starts that have just been so abysmally bad. Your offense starts pressing a bit. We've seen that in the last 2 games where, even though I thought yesterday the offense played better, well, then you get in the second half of the game and the clock's ticking and you're in the 6th inning. You only have a few more at-bats left, and here you go, you're going to start striking out a lot more. So, yeah, the lineup is still a problem, without a doubt, but every 4th and 5th day out of your 5 days in the rotation, you can't even get out of the 3rd inning without having a crooked number on the board. That part has been, I think that just trickles down to the offense. Then what is the offense supposed to do to try to crawl out of 6 runs by the time the 5th inning rolls around?
Well, and it's a fair point because it's an offense that's already pressing, and when they find themselves down 3-0 heading to the top of the 2nd or early in the 3rd, not using any game specifically as an example, just looking at the trends of what's been happening so far this season, I think that's only going to have an offense press more, especially when they're struggling. And Declan, I think you make a great point. I don't have any numbers off the top of my head. Maybe you do somewhere in your War and Peace version of a scorecard that you showed me, or scorebook that you showed me.
No joke. And I'm keeping score at home. That's how dedicated everyone's like. When are you going to stop caring about the Twins, Declan? And if I stop doing book, let me know. Then that's the first sign.
If you love baseball, you'll keep the book no matter what, independent of the team on the field. I would love to know. Going back to last year, a friend pointed this out to me because, it happens once or twice. You don't really pay much of attention to it. But then when something gets pointed out to you, you'll pay more attention to it. You'll follow it more. I feel like, again, I watch a lot of Twins and I dabble at watching other teams on ESPN and MLB Network. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say the Twins pitching staff by far throws more hittable and good pitches to hit on 0-2 and 1-2 than any team in Major League Baseball. It just seems to burn them more than almost any other team. And again, I don't have stats in front of me. That might just be me making that up or thinking that. But man, they sure give up a lot of good hits and a lot of good contact on 0-2 and 1-2. And Declan, something that's creeped in over the last few games, I know our guy Judd, I saw him on the X Machine talking about this too, and I think some of this is just a product of Carlos Correa not playing, Max Kepler not playing, Royce Lewis not playing. The defense is starting to struggle. I never did go back and double check. I think on Sunday, Declan, against the Tigers, did the 2 hits in the 8th inning stay hits and not errors? At one point, the official score in Detroit ruled them both hits, and I was actually listening to Chris Atterbury and Paul Molitor on the call, and I think I told you this. Paul Molitor basically said, boy, with this official score for the Detroit Tigers, they should lead the league in hitting, basically saying he thought they were both errors by the Minnesota Twins. So that's just another issue of the myriad of issues plaguing this team right now, Declan. And then I think it's fair to talk about the bats that they brought in, specifically, as we're now calling him Manuel Margot. I always thought it was Manny. Sorry, Manny, but we'll go with Manuel Margot and Carlos Santana. What are they doing to help this ball club right now?
Yes.
I mean, next to nothing is probably being kind.
Yeah, Santana's been really bad, and it's put them in a tough spot pitching wise. Just in the second inning alone. So the first inning, I went and did find this. God bless MLB.com for and baseball stats in general. This is the absolute best and the worst thing about baseball, because there's a bajillion different ways to prove your point. But in the first inning, teams are hitting 292 against the Twins, which obviously isn't great, but that's 6th worst in the American League. In the second inning, though, it gets way worse. So once that middle of the order mostly comes up, or that end of the, there's at least somewhat of some at-bats that have taken place, teams are hitting 333 against the Twins in the second inning. So, I mean, you have a cumulative average there of well over 300 in the first 2 rounds, and that is 100% largely on, the Chris Paddack, Louie Varlands of the world, and we're still dealing with a small sample there. But that puts you in a hole. And then, I think the lineup actually, although it still has not lived up to its potential, rightfully so with the injuries, I think there have been signs like Ryan Jeffers, who's been great. Byron Buxton, his defense and offense can kind of sometimes offset some of the problems he does at the plate, but he has shown some life here. Alex Kirilloff has gotten off to a good start. So there actually, I think, are signs of, things that could get better in the lineup. But every 4th and 5th day, you're just going to be counting on basically a crooked number by the second inning. I mean, that's just going to put you completely behind the 8 ball. So, yeah, I would say you have to get those 2 right soon. And I know Pablo Lopez hasn't pitched up to potential after his opening day stellar start, but I'm not worried about Pablo, and I don't think really anyone is worried too much about Pablo Lopez. He actually did that kind of last year too. He got off to a little bit of a weird start after the contract extension, then turned into one of the best pitchers in baseball. But when your starting pitching is putting you deep in the hole by the time the 3rd inning rolls around and you're down by a crooked number, I mean, obviously, it doesn't take any statistical St. Cloud or Lakeville guy to figure out your odds of winning the ball game are going to be pretty mill.
Well, it's tough to win these games too, Declan, when you're combining both not hitting and then giving up a lot of runs. Again, I as of, I think it was Sunday, was the first time all year, Declan, the Twins had scored a run in the second inning. Again, I know at that point you're talking still 2 weeks worth of games, but you'd also had 14, 15, 16 cracks at it, right? Like that alone is a bit of a head scratcher as to how that happens. I think if you're trying to be positive, I do like what you did touch on there, Declan, that there are some things to look at where there are some things going well, and then you hope. I mean, I guess we don't know how long it's going to take before we see our guy C4 back, but the indications are they don't think it's going to be horribly long, but not to rip the Twins too much. They've said that before, and guys have been out for months. So who really knows what that means? So it's just, I don't know about you, Declan, but it's this really weird feeling right now of I don't know whether to be panicked or whether just to sit back and go, well, as of today, there's still 146 games left, plenty of games in the division. I think the division is better, but I don't think anybody's going to win 100 games, so I don't think anybody's going to bury you. There's still meat on the bone if the boys get healthy, but again, that's if, and not only if, Declan, it's when. It's not like all 3 of the guys we talked about at the beginning of this episode are going to come back on the same day. So you're just kind of waiting and at the mercy of their health. I know Kepler was running the bases, which also, again, not to be mean, I know a bone bruise is painful, but I mean, come on, buddy. Like, and then also it's a Twins thing too. He's running the bases. That's like the first step of rehab. Yeah. Can he not just go in the batting cage and take some cuts and be ready to play? Like, it seems like we're maybe taking a little bit too long for a team that's really struggling offensively to get him back on the field. But Duran, hopefully when he comes back, that's another cog you can add in the bullpen. So overall, I'm trying to stay positive. But yeah, when you're only one series that you've won was now basically what, 2.5 weeks ago, and it was out of the gate against a team that I think everybody expects to be better in the Royals, but also not going to win the division. It's just it's a tough spot to be in right now. But I'm still firmly not in the panic meter, but I'm sitting somewhere around a 5, Declan. It's getting late early, as the kids like to say.
So yeah, in the last 7 days on the offensive front, and look, some teams have played more games than the Twins, but the Twins do have the 5th most hits in the American League over the last 7 days. So I mean, there's been some signs of improvement there. Ryan Jeffers has been great at the plate in the last week. He has 12 hits. He has 5 runs, 2 homers, hitting .462 he moved up to the 2nd spot in the order, even against a right-handed pitcher today, which was a good sign. So they're going to reward guys that are starting to hit a little bit more. I know they sent down Matt Wallner, and Trevor Larnach comes up here. He is able to get a 9th inning hit, but he has a couple just weak pop-ups to start the game, which obviously are less than ideal. You want to see him kind of take an opportunity here with Wallner being sent down. To your point, Kepler's still out of the lineup, so it's kind of still Trevor Larnach's last grasp here for the taking if you want a big league job and if you basically want to be a major leaguer. I mean, it's pretty much now or never for you being a former first-round pick. And, and Buxton, look, there's still going to be some times there where he strikes out a lot. He had a nice at-bat today where he fouled off a bunch of pitches. He ropes a speedy triple after the ball gets bobbled. Obviously, the stellar catch in center field. You can live with, I think, Byron Buxton, some of those miscues at the plate because he's playing elite defense and potentially even snagged a second home run that maybe should have been able to catch if it wasn't for a fan or the wall maybe reaching out behind him. But regardless, there are things in the offense I've liked, but the starting pitching has given you basically every 4th, 5th day has given you no shot to win the game. So as soon as they start cleaning that up, I think it's going to be hard to rely really on the offense to, hey, go out and score 7 runs. Well, they haven't been able to really even do that at all. So the starting pitching on the back end, if that doesn't get fixed, yeah, you are talking about a team that won't win the division and will be lucky to win 70 to 75 games.
You are the segue master. You just kind of took a question out of my mouth that I was going to ask you. What is at this point worst case scenario for this Minnesota Twins team? Is it that low 70 win total if they can't get the pitching figured out? Because I'm with you, Declan. We can talk about the hitting all day long, but if they can't pitch, it won't matter. Case in point, they didn't hit for 4 months last year. What kept them in the mix last year, Declan? Great starting pitching, and let's call a spade a spade. Let's be honest about it. The division wasn't great.
Yeah.
But this year, again, with the division slightly better, you would also expect that Pablo Lopez is hopefully at least the same, if not slightly better. I think we're seeing, and the hope is that Joe Ryan's better. I do think Bailey Ober will hopefully likely at least be a serviceable 3 or 4. But if your pitching can't carry you and be stable all season long, it won't matter if the lineup ever comes around. And I'll be honest, Declan, I don't know if the lineup is ever going to come around to the point that I think a lot of people want it to, because the organizational philosophy might just not allow it to score 7, 8, 9 runs a game. Right. Maybe there'll be those days where they score 11, 12, 13, followed up with 6 or 7, but then there might be a couple days where they score 1 or 2. I'm just not sure the organizational philosophy at this point allows for these guys to mash in and out in every day, and that might just be something that also warrants talking about at some point on Extra Innings, because I don't want to call it an experiment. That term gets overused, but the David Popkins era, as I like to call him, no Popkins, it's quite an interesting one, and I don't know how much you can put on him at the end of the day. But if you remember, Declan, at one point last year, there was a borderline mutiny where some players basically borderline admitted they weren't even listening to him anymore. They were just doing their own thing, so that alone's kind of a problem. So
yeah,
again, there's a lot going on, but you know what solves this, Declan? Starting to win a few games. If you can put a few wins together and you start feeling good, a lot of this negativity starts to go to the back burner and we're not talking about it as much. Winning cures everything, so let's hope the boys can start to do that here real soon.
Yeah, so I mean, worst case scenario, I mean, yeah, they're a 65, 70 win team, which they're tracking
Boy,
to kind of be like that if things played out the way they are with their record. But I just think there's still too much just on paper good enough players for that to be the case, unless they really start selling things off and there's more significant injuries, like if Joe Ryan got injured or Pablo Lopez missed more significant time, then yeah, that would be a significant issue. But yeah, until they start really putting it all together, I mean, I understand why people are, a little nervous here and why they don't really believe in this ball club. And you can get White Sox for 7 games, or, I think they have them for 4, and then they have them for 3 on the road right afterwards. And they have the Angels mixed in. You're going to see the Tigers right away again, I believe, this weekend. So, you're going to see some divisional teams that you can try to make up some ground on. But yeah, a less than optimal start. And that's where I have, don't get dragged into hell. Someone, for the love of God, even with the dead weights that are on the ankles here, pull them up and get them out, and hopefully you can start running away and getting your season back on track.
here's the thing about not getting dragged to hell by the team that is currently sitting in hell and trying to pull everybody else, the Chicago White Sox. I don't believe they're going to go 2-14 every 16 games
Also
the
true.
rest of the way through the season. So they're going to get some wins somewhere along the way. I really hope a bunch of them are not at the expense of our Minnesota Twins, because Declan, that's the key right now. When you see the White Sox, that's meat on the bone. You got to get 80 to 90% of those games. No different than when the Twins got the Oakland A's late in the season last year. It's baseball. You're not guaranteed to win every game. That's why you play 162. But by golly, you got to win most of them when teams like that are on your schedule. And it's kind of amazing to think about. The Twins are already at that point in this season. You don't want to give those games back. You need to take as many of those as you possibly can.
Right. Yeah, so hit that subscribe button. This is SKOR North Extra Innings. Hopefully the Twins can start figuring some things out. You'll have another edition of the Extra Innings episode, at least for sure, tomorrow right here on this YouTube channel. So hit that subscribe button. We had Trevor Plouffe on Tuesday morning as well, which was a fun episode, so you can go check that out. Hit that subscribe button. We appreciate everyone helping us push over 2,500 YouTube subscribers. If you can, give us a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify. This is SKOR North Extra Innings. That's Ross Brendel. I'm Declan Goff. We'll be talking at you tomorrow.